As Prime Minister, the first time around, you championed many Muslim causes around the world. Today you have a whole host of crises affecting Muslims: Syria, Yemen, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, not to mention, of course, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But I'd like to focus on the Rohingya crisis because it is closer to home. ASEAN seems to have turned the other way, perhaps under Chinese pressures not to be too vocal on this issue, even though many people have called the kind of violence that the Rohingya have been subjected to a clear case of genocide. Do you see it as a clear case of genocide, and are you willing to lend your voice to this issue and speak loudly within the ASEAN?
We have been vocal. We have taken action to the point that we can, but we condemn this action openly, and we condemn Myanmar for carrying out what appears to be genocide. So we have not minced words about this. Although our policy in ASEAN is the non-interference in the internal affairs of the countries, but because this is something happening to, although their own population, but it is grossly unjust, we have voiced our opinion.
Would you be willing to do more than voicing your opinion? Would you be willing to mediate? And again, your country, Malaysia, played an important role. Several years ago, I believe your ambassador to the UN, Ambassador Razali, played an important role in gaining the release of Aung San Suu Kyi. Have you been disappointed with her position, her denials of anything major going on?
I have myself written to her. She has not replied. I am very disappointed because during the time when she was detained, we had struggled and tried to get her released. Of course, eventually she was released. But over this issue, she seems to be a changed person. She did not want to say anything against the action taken by the military on these Rohingyas. So we make it quite clear that we don't really support her anymore.
You have lost all faith in her?
Yeah.
You do not support her anymore?
No.
Are you calling on other countries as well to perhaps do something about this?
We have complained about the treatment of the Rohingyas to the world. And in fact, we have ourselves received quite a lot of Rohingya people in our country.
Thank you.
Good morning, Prime Minister. I was wondering if you could speak on the Rohingya issue.
The Rohingya in the Rakhine state in Myanmar, PM.
Rohingya. Yeah, we feel that injustice must be something that the whole world should fight against. It is unjust to treat citizens or even non-citizens in your country unjustly. It's not right. Here you have massacres being carried out against the Rohingyas, ostensibly because they were not citizens of Myanmar. But they have been there for the past 800 years. It was the British who decided to have Burma, to include all these people also in Burma. The history is that there are people who have been living there a long time. So the Burmese government should accept them, compared to Malaysia, where we have people whose origins are from other countries. When we became independent, we accepted them as citizens of the country, and they participate in the governments of the country. Every government would have people of all races, whether they are immigrants or indigenous people, they participate fully in the governance of the country. I do not understand why the Rohingyas cannot be accepted by the Burmese as a part of the citizens of Myanmar. Of course, Myanmar or Burmese people at independence actually expel a lot of Indians because they seem to think that Myanmar is only for Myanmarese people. But the Indians also have been there a long time. They were doing all the business. But in Malaysia, most of the business is done by the Chinese. We accepted the Chinese.
Now, this will be my last question for the PM. There's a gentleman there with his hand up, about 4 in from the side. Yeah, if that could pass him the microphone.
Good morning, Tun. Welcome to New York. Thank you for saving Malaysia from kleptocracy. My name is John Pang. I am with Columbia University and the International Crisis Group. I actually had to be here. I had to move here because of the kleptocracy. Yeah, but I wanted to ask you about your first administration. This is the second Mahathir administration. The first Mahathir administration was characterized by a vision for Malaysia, but also internationally. Malaysia led the world, actually, or was a leading player in East Asian regionalism, in Afro-Asian regionalism, and in South-South sort of multilateralism. In 1997, you proposed the East Asia Economic Caucus. Don't you think that at this time, with rising protectionism, a sort of crumbling kind of deep anxiety about regional multilateralism, global order, and so on, that as perhaps the elder statesman of Asia, or actually the elder statesman of the planet, you might want to bring that idea back? Would you want to bring back the East Asian multilateralism? Something in the form that you proposed back in 1997.
I think
it was shot down.
We've got it.
Okay. Well, that idea about an East Asian community was because Europe is a single unit at that time. There was this European community, and in North America they have NAFTA, the community which includes the US, Canada, and Mexico. So everybody seems to be forming regional organization to strengthen their voice in international fora. But in East Asia, the countries were basically acting individually, and our voices were not strong. In fact, when we go to the WTO, for example, Malaysia would be there alone. We cannot fight against the delegation from the US, which would send about 200 experts to these meetings. So I thought that if we come together, the East Asian countries come together, they would have a stronger voice. But of course, Mr. Baker at that time told Japan and Korea not to be involved in this East Asian project. So we couldn't do that. But later on, the president of South Korea suggested the formation of ASEAN +3, the Southeast Asian nation plus the 3 Northeast Asian nations. That is almost like the East Asian community. I think it is good for regions to form such communities, but we should not be exclusive. We should try and work with each other. All the regions should work with each other, because in the so-called globalized world, you can't separate yourself into distinct communities which are not in confrontation with other communities. That is not good. But for the moment, I think the idea, there's a lot of talk about globalized world, but in fact, it is not globalized. Everybody protects his own nation.
Finishing on that point, Prime Minister, the East Asian Summit now exists, and that borrowed some of your original conceptual vision. Is there something you think Malaysia, under your leadership, could do to take the East Asian Summit idea further and turn it into more of an economic and even political reality?
Well, it's going to be quite difficult, because ethnically we are quite different, people with different culture. But in 1 or 2 areas we can come together. For example, we trade using the US dollar. we could have a token, East Asian token or currency that we use purpose only for trading. It's not to be used domestically, but we settle all trade differences using this East Asian currency for trading only. That could bring us together quite well, but later on, if we begin to understand each other better, then we can go into other areas of cooperation.